No, the Atlanta Braves are not going to trade Drake Baldwin for Pablo Lopez. Yes, welcome on in to Braves Today for Monday, January 13th, your source of news, notes, and updates on your Atlanta Braves. I'm your host, Lindsay Crosby. You can follow me on Twitter and Blue Sky at Crosby Baseball. You can follow the show on Twitter, Braves_today. We've got a Facebook page and Instagram as well. And you can find all of my written work, bravestoday.com. That's the Braves Today Substack, as this is both a podcast and a newsletter. And this is a Mailbag Monday. I've got your questions here. Everything from the relievers who are the favorite to make, or who could make the last spot in the bullpen, trade targets. Troy sent a great email. If you have an email for a mailbag, by the way, contact at bravestoday.com. But first, a lot of people asked me to talk about a proposed trade from Bleacher Report with the Minnesota Twins. So let's talk about what Zachary Reimer wrote. Their lead MLB writer, he wrote an article, Realistic MLB Trades That Could Happen Before 2025 Spring Training. And some of these make sense. The A's take Jordan Montgomery off the Arizona Diamondbacks' hands. The A's have to spend more money to not face a grievance from the Players Association about not spending enough of their revenue sharing money on salaries. Makes sense. The Red Sox acquire Nolan Arenado, which would move. That's something where they would send Masataka Yoshida back, and then they would move Rafi Devers to first base or DH along with Tristan Casas. There was a deal in here about the Yankees get Luis Ariz. Makes sense. The defense isn't good, but would give them a consistent leadoff man on in front of Judge. Like, a couple of these make sense. But one of these was, quote, the Braves finally make a splash on Pablo Lopez. And what this deal was, right-hand pitcher Pablo Lopez and catcher Christian Vasquez to Atlanta for catcher Drake Baldwin, right-hand pitcher Hurston Waldrop, and right-hand pitcher J.R. Ritchie. And there's a few reasons why this deal is not going to happen, okay? So I think the big thing here, reason number one, is in the wake of the Garrett Crochet deal between the Chicago White Sox and Boston Red Sox, we got some reporting that Atlanta was one of the finalists for Crochet. It makes sense. Atlanta tried to trade to him prior to last season and couldn't do it. Like, it makes sense. But we also heard some whispers and some rumors that Atlanta did not want to include Drake Baldwin in that trade package. So if we assume that is correct, and there's no reason why we can't or why we shouldn't, then why would you not be willing to trade Drake Baldwin, or consider Drake Baldwin in a deal for Garrett Crochet, and then turn around and put him in a package for Pablo Lopez? Garrett Crochet, only 2 years of control versus 3 for Lopez, but Crochet statistically was better, although you do have workload concerns here. The stuff is better, and he is cheaper, right? He's also, I believe he's also somewhat of a local guy. Like, he was born in Mississippi and went to Tennessee for college. So, like, the profile of the guys that signed early extensions with Atlanta, and he's not maybe he's a Boris Klein, I'm not sure, but either way, it's something where if you weren't going to offer Drake Baldwin in a deal for Crochet, which you probably wouldn't have beat the Red Sox deal anyway, they have one of the better farm systems in baseball, but if you weren't going to offer Crochet in that deal, why would you then put him in the Pablo Lopez deal? Doesn't make sense to me, right? Another reason why this doesn't make sense is the money you would take on for these two guys means you would be over the CBT, okay? Between Lopez and Vasquez, I believe the CBT hit would be like $28 million and change. And Reimer actually, I think, puts that in the article. $28.3 million in AAV for 2025. And he said, they're willing to go over the luxury tax. And yes, they're willing to go over the luxury tax. But to me, that is the worst case scenario, is if you go over the luxury tax by $5 million, right? Because you get all of the downside of going over the luxury tax, as in you don't reset it, and you're paying a 50% tax without any of the benefits, which is signing players to make your team better. If Atlanta had zero interest in resetting the CBT this offseason, we did the show early in the offseason. They could have spent close to $60 million in payroll to get them to the same point they were last season, being just shy of the third threshold. And you could have gotten a lot of stuff for $60 million. Why would you sit out signing any major league guaranteed deals all the way until now, just to now go over by just a couple $1 million once most of the impact bats, impact arms, and all of that was off the table? It doesn't make sense. I understand they're willing to go over the CBT for the right player and the right deal. This, to me, is not the right deal. Maybe a deal without Christian Vazquez would make sense, but then you also would not have Drake Baldwin in that deal. And I don't know if the Twins make that deal for just 2 or maybe 3 arms without Baldwin. Because the big thing here, you have to remember this too. If they were to make this deal, the Braves would lose Chadwick Trump. Unless they wanted to carry 3 catchers on the opening day roster. Chadwick Trump is out of options. And yes, I know Vazquez has played a little bit of second, a little bit of third, and a little bit of first. But he's not really good at any of them. He can just do it. And Chadwick Trump, offensively, is nothing special. But his defense is fine. The pitching staff likes throwing to him. He's not yet 30 years old. He's close. He's not yet 30 years old. So if you were to choose Christian Vazquez over him on the opening day roster, you have to expose him to waivers to get him to the minors. And somebody would take him. You would lose Chadwick Trump. So then you'd be in a situation where you traded Drake Baldwin away, when you promoted him, depending on when in the year it was, you would have had 6 or 7 years of control of a young quality bat with decent defense. You would lose Chadwick Trump. And then you would have Christian Vazquez for 1 season before he became a free agent. What do you do for a catcher next year, right? In 26. What do you do for a backup catcher then? You don't have, in this case, like your minor leagues, you had Sandy Leon, who I believe is, if not 40, he's close to 40. I want to say Sandy Leon, he's 36 this season. So you'd have to promote 37-year-old Sandy Leon, who hadn't been in the majors in a few years, to be your backup. You'd have to go spend money in free agency to sign a backup. And we saw the catcher market go nuts this year, and a lot of dudes got a lot of money. It just, for a lot of different reasons, it doesn't make sense. And I think Braves fans, and a lot of people are guilty of this because this is how all of these outlets work now, sometimes see some of these things and think that, oh, Zach Reimer's reporting from a place of intel. And he's not. As somebody who used to write for Sports Illustrated, somebody who used to write for Athlon Sports, and again, has had content in the Bleacher Report app, whether it was live streams or different articles that I wrote syndicated on Bleacher Report. The way these things work is Zach Reimer was looking for deals that would make sense. Not working from an intel perspective. Nobody from Atlanta side or Minnesota side has talked to Zach Reimer and said, hey, we think this would make sense if we made a deal with Atlanta. We'd love to make this deal with Atlanta, or we're talking about this deal with Atlanta. This is all, in my head, from a national perspective on paper, this makes sense. Atlanta lost their backup catcher. Atlanta needs a starter. The Twins, for money reasons, want to trade a starter and a catcher. Let's put them together. Let's go grab the top prospects from the Braves. We'll stick them in the deal as the compensation and go. From a national perspective, it works. From a reality perspective, with what we know as Braves fans, as listeners of this show, as readers of the newsletter, as highly engaged Braves fans, from what we know, this doesn't make sense because we understand how the organization values Drake Baldwin. We understand that the team only wants to go over the CBT for a huge deal that's super impactful and all of that stuff. So, no, the Atlanta Braves are not going to trade Drake Baldwin for Pablo Lopez. If that happens, I will invite Zachary Reimer on this show and I will complete mea culpa and beg for forgiveness and all of that. But I'm not worried about having to do that because it's not going to happen. In just a minute, Troy sent a really good email looking for some trade targets, a list of a couple guys Some of these are major leaguers, some of these are kind of career minor leaguers, but really interesting. We'll break that down next, right here on Braves Today. Welcome back to Braves Today. Lindsay Crosby taking your questions on a Mailbag Monday. Again, lots of ways to get them to us. I'm on Twitter at Crosby Baseball. So is on Twitter, Braves_today. Email, contact@bravestoday.com. That's how Troy got this one to us. He had a list of a couple guys that he thought would be interesting for the Braves to potentially target in a trade. So let's take these in order. The first one, and he specifically said this one was an idea of a guy to replace Charlie Morton, was Marcus Stroman of the New York Yankees. I'm going to disagree with Troy on this one, and I think it's because you have to think about what the purpose of replacing Charlie Morton would be. We've talked about the two options you have for a starter are you have a guy who could be a postseason starter for you, or a guy who can take innings for you, right? Marcus Stroman doesn't do either of those things. Marcus Stroman is, the last 3 years, his innings totals in those last 3 years, 138.2, 136.2, and 154.2. The value of Charlie Morton is he would take the ball every fifth or sixth day. He'd give you 30 starts. He'd give you 160 or more innings every single year. Marcus Stroman doesn't do that for you. If you were interested in acquiring Marcus Stroman to be your number 5 starter at his $18.3 million salary, and his CBT is like 18.5 because of some weird stuff in there, you would have just paid Charlie Morton $15 million to come back. Like, the goal with that final starter and getting those innings is just, if you're going to bring somebody on, do it as cheap as possible, right? And you would have gone with the guy you know in Charlie Morton for 15 versus the guy you don't in Marcus Stroman for 18.3. He also, a thing that Atlanta does not like, is he has a vesting option for 2026 that is also, I think, $18.3 or $18.5 million. And it's if he throws 140 innings. Now, again, last 3 years, he only broke that once. 138.2, 136.2, 154.2. So it would have vested if he repeats in 25 what he did in 24. But Atlanta doesn't like all of that extra stuff. The biggest thing in the world to AA is they want cost certainty, right? They don't want a ton of arbitration eligible guys. They don't want a bunch of player options or mutual options or vesting options or player opt-outs. They want to know this is our salary, commitments, and expectations and where we're going to be going into the offseason every single year going forward. They want a pretty good idea of this is our salary. We don't want to have to worry about, is this guy going to choose to leave or not? We don't want to worry about, is he going to pick up his option or is he going to walk? We want to know what the deal is going to be. And if we want to keep a guy, we have the club option to keep a guy. Never mind the fact that Marcus Stroman's fastball has really deteriorated. He averaged 90 miles an hour with it last year. And he doesn't really give you the workload that you're looking for from that fifth starter. I don't think he'd give you the ERA or performance either. If you just wanted the dude who could get blown up, but could start 25 times in the fifth spot, Bryce Elder's right there. He's virtually costs nothing. You can promote Bryce Elder, let him run an ERA of 6 if you wanted just a guy to take the ball 30 times. They want a guy who can take the ball 30 times, give you 160-something innings, and not give up an ERA over 5. And again, would have rather signed Charlie Morton for 15 than to give 18 and change plus whatever it took to get Stroman from the Yankees. Jack Suwinski of the Pirates. This outfielder, this is an interesting one to me because he's been good. He's been decent in the past. His defense cratered last year. He got optioned down. And most of that was range. He went from like 80th percentile in range to 7th percentile in range from 23 to 24. But it's a really weird profile that I think just shows that his ceiling is limited a little bit. He does not chase a lot, right? 96th percentile in chase in 23 over a full season. But he whiffs a lot. 22nd percentile in whiffs, which means that 78% of players whiffed less than him. And his strikeout rate was like bottom 10% for like high, like percentile, like highest strikeout rates. So he just misses in the zone a lot. Now, that being said, he's above average runner. Again, I don't know why the range cratered in 24. May have been small sample size, may have been an injury thing, even though his sprint speed didn't go down. I don't quite know why. But I'm not opposed to the concept of trading for Jack Suwinski as a change of scenery candidate. My issue is taking on a lefty hitting outfielder who swings and misses too much is just acquiring another Jarred Kelenic. And you're at the point right now, I personally am starting to think that this might be the last season for Jarred Kelenic to show he can be an everyday player. That if he struggles again this year, all season, my personal headcanon here is that they're writing off a lot of last year for Jarred Kelenic. Because the plan was you're going to play left field, you're going to bat 8th in the lineup, no pressure, no worries. And then they brought in Adam Duvall in spring, so a last-minute change and role. Now you're a platoon bat. Then you became an everyday starter, but you moved to center field, and then you went to leadoff. A lot of things changed, and so they're just like, hey, rough year for everybody. We're writing it off. We're starting fresh this year with our where we think you are as a player. If Jarred Kelenic doesn't work out in 25, I do think you're in a situation where maybe you go look at another reclamation project guy. And in that case, absolutely, Jack Suwinski would be somebody I think they would consider. Right now, I don't think you can take another lefty hitter that whiffs too much when you already have that guy on the roster, right? A couple here that I don't necessarily know how available they are. Deshaun Kersey of the Minnesota Twins, Cade Marlowe of the Seattle Mariners. Both those guys, a lot of time in AAA. Kersey's the backup to Byron Buxton in center field. I feel like they're going to need him because Buxton's injury prone. He did perform better in AAA than Marlowe did. Marlowe hit 236 in AAA. I think theirs is Tacoma. Kersey hit 300 in St. Paul last year, 14 homers, 36 stolen bases. Making a deal for a guy like Kersey makes sense to me if you lose Michael Harris for some amount of time and you don't want Jarred Kelenic playing center field every day. It's a center field profile. More speed than power, all of that kind of stuff. Putting him in left field doesn't make a lot of sense to me. You're really wasting the power potential of left field with a guy like that. I'm not opposed to it. I just don't necessarily know if it's the most important thing to do. Cade Marlowe, similar, but he also only batted 236 in AAA last year. I'd probably rather have Kersey than Marlowe. Either way, I feel like they're probably not available for trade, and their value is not as high to Atlanta as it is to other teams. So if they were to come available, other teams would give more to have a center fielder over a team like Atlanta who has a really good center fielder and just needs an insurance policy or wanted an insurance policy. The last two, Leody Taveras of the Texas Rangers, making $475 million. He avoided arbitration last week. 2 more arbitration years after this. Struggled last year. Everybody did on that team. But the 2 years before that combined, 264, 19 homers, 25 stolen bases in 242 games across those years. He's the odd man out if Evan Carter is healthy. I don't know if they would make that deal. I don't know if they'd be willing to move him. Simply because Evan Carter missed all year with a back injury. And then Wyatt Langford did miss some time as well. Adolis Garcia is getting older. It feels like he has enough team control. He's cheap enough. They'd want to keep him as a part-time starter. But we'll see. Again, another center field profile. I don't know if it's as valuable to Atlanta as it is to other teams. I'm not opposed. I just don't know what the compensation would be. Maybe this is some sort of money throw-in thing if they were to make a deal for a guy like a John Gray. I don't know. Oswald Peraza. This one's really interesting of the Yankees. He lost the shortstop job to Anthony Volpe. Never really has been the same since. Was a very heralded prospect. Is now not. Career 258 hitter in AAA with 262 games across 4 seasons. The issue here, he does not have any options. Unless you just keep 2 middle infielders, and him and Nick Allen, and then you're prepared to jettison somebody like Luke Williams or Eli White, you have to lose somebody if you go out and make this deal. I do think he's a change of scenery candidate. I do think his defense is pretty decent. He could be an option if he were to figure it out to be your shortstop. He's only 24 years old. He still has plenty of development he can do. He could be a future shortstop for you. I think he could be. Honestly, if I'm picking anybody from the Yankees within reason, I'm picking Oswaldo Cabrera instead. I like his defense, bunch of experience playing the corner outfield spots as well as third base and second base and shortstop. Not as strong at shortstop, but I think he'd be a super utility guy who would be awesome for you. I just also don't see them trading Cabrera. They'd probably rather trade Peraza. Maybe it happens. The Braves play the Yankees in spring training all the time. Maybe they see him and decide they like him and make a deal. I'm not opposed to it. I do think it would give you an avenue to potentially having a shortstop in the future if you wanted to move on from Arcia. Of all of these, that's the one I probably like the most. Don't know how likely it is, but either way, I like the deal. Thank you for the email, Troy. In just a second, questions from Jack about some of the back-end relievers. Last spot in the bullpen. Who's most likely to get that spot? We'll break it down next, right here on Braves Today. Final segment of Braves Today. Lindsay Crosby here answering your questions on a Mailbag Monday episode. Reminder, if you have questions for us, tons of ways to get them to us. I'm on Twitter at Crosby Baseball. You can email us, contact@bravestoday.com. Leave them in the YouTube comments down below. Tons of places for it. This one from Jack, he gave me a list of 6 of the guys that we've either added over the offseason or we already had in the organization. And I added the 7th on here. Who is most likely to get the final spot in the opening day roster? A little bit of housekeeping on this. I'm assuming that Anderson Pilar, your Rule 5 pick out of Miami, or from Miami, I'm assuming that he makes it. So then you have either 1 or 2 spots open, depending on how you feel about Angel Perdomo, the lefty, being your third lefty in the pen. This is Iglesias, Pierce Johnson, Aaron Bummer, Dylan Lee, Daisybel Hernandez, Anderson Pilar. You've got either 1 or 2 spots. I do think it's possible Angel Perdomo spends the first month of the season on a rehab assignment. He gets 30 days. He pitched a little bit in instruction stuff, but did not enter a game last year recovering from Tommy John. It's possible. I don't know. You'll have either 1 or 2 spots. Okay. There's 2 of these guys on the 40-man roster, Domingo Gonzalez and Roldy Munoz. So obviously, being on the 40-man makes it easy for you to be added to the opening day roster because there's no corresponding move required. That being said, I don't think either guy ends up being the guy because of experience reasons, right? Roldy Munoz was added to protect him from the Rule 5 draft. He's a flamethrower. Average fastball velocity last year was like 98 or so. He just needs upper level reps. In his career, he's faced 174 batters in Double-A. He's never been in Triple-A. Okay. Now, of those 174 batters, 34 hits, 18 runs, 18 walks, 56 strikeouts. You got to bring the walk rate down a little bit. We talked about this on the New Year's resolution show, by the way, for the pitching. I only give up 2 homers. I like his stuff. He just needs experience, right? He just needs experience with top-level hitters before he comes to the majors. Domingo Gonzalez, similar. He does have more AAA experience than Munoz. He has 124 batters faced in AAA. He was added to protect him from minor league free agency, not the Rule 5 draft. But here's the thing. Domingo Gonzalez is Daisybel Hernandez's walk rate without the velocity. He put up a 10.4% walk rate in AAA last year. But unlike Daisybel, he's not throwing 98, 99 miles an hour. He's throwing 94, 95. He could stand to get some more experience. It's possible, already being on the 40-man roster, if they don't want to run the risk of losing anybody. It's possible he is the guy, but I feel it's a little bit unlikely. My 2 favorites to make the roster of this group, either both of them if Perdomo's not ready, or just one of them if Perdomo is, Eniel De Los Santos and Anoli Paredes. So, I guess one at a time here. De Los Santos was a free agent. They signed minor league free agent in December. 4-seam slider. He's got some MLB experience. He really struggled last year. And if you go and you look at the movement profile of his pitches, his slider just lost a ton of drop. It didn't really add noticeable horizontal movement. It just lost vertical movement. So if Atlanta can fix that, if the player development folks can figure out what happened, was it injury? Was it a grip change? Was it a velocity? What was it? If they can fix that, I think he's probably one of your 2 back, end of the roster relievers, end of the bullpen relievers for 2025, because he's got MLB experience. Anoli Paredes has less, but does have some major league experience as well. Fastball, slider, and an occasional sinker. Gets really good ground ball rates, which I think is a big deal. He was a free agent from the Cubs, I think in November, maybe. He's a guy to me that, again, short track record of success. The peripherals weren't great in the majors, but they were awesome in AAA. I really like what he does. I think he's a quality ad. He's probably the favorite for me if you have to add just one. I do like him better. I do like his chances better than Gonzalez and Munoz because the experience and at least some positive track record here. If you're adding two, De Los Santos makes sense if you can figure out what happened to the slider. Jordan Weems is a non-roster invitee. He was a free agent they signed in December. He was with the Nationals most recently. It's a four-seam slider. He has a splitter. The velo's good. He's 95, 96 or so. If you have a guy who signs a minor league deal and ends up breaking out and sticking on the roster all year, he's my pick. Like, I really think that the velocity is good. If you can get the splitter into a legit third weapon, Atlanta think here they like to have guys ramp up usage of an underused pitch. If the splitter can be around the zone enough to be a legitimate threat, and you can do four-seam slider splitter with that good velocity, I like him to be the guy all year who sticks in the pen and surprises us. I don't know if he'll make their opening day roster, but keep an eye on Jordan Weems. I am really impressed with what I've seen of him so far, and I think there's a lot of quality in there. Hayden Harris is the undrafted free agent lefty from, I think it was the 2021 draft out of Georgia Southern. I actually interviewed him on the Old Prospect podcast. Super great kid. Doesn't throw that hard. Fastball's like 91, 92, but it's just super deceptive. Like, dudes cannot pick it up out of the hand. People don't really square it up, don't hit it that well. I remember talking to Mark Bowman and Justin Toscano of the AJC down in Northport last spring. We were all standing outside waiting for either Spencer Strider or Charlie Morton. And Harris had come in the game. And we were like, you would just think that dudes would tee off on this. And nobody does. And it's wild. So probably needs more high-level experience. He scuffled a little bit in AAA last year. It's interesting. I do worry the ceiling's overall kind of limited by the velocity. If he picks up a tick or two, I think he's probably eventually going to be that third lefty in the pen behind your Bummer and Lee. I like his stuff. It's just a question of, does he have enough experience for them? It's a similar situation to Gonzalez. Does he have enough experience for them to put him in there? I don't think opening day he does, but I do think you may see him this year. And the last guy, I added Wander Suero. Cutter, changeup mostly. He has a curveball. Again, doesn't use it enough. I wonder if Atlanta's fix here, they got him up from Houston, I think. Wonder if the fix here is to either give him a slider or have him focus more on improving the curveball. I could see them being hesitant to work too much on a slider because it could take away from the cutter. If those blend together, you just weaken the cutter as his primary or his only fastball, really. But cutter, changeup, curveball could work if you can get the curveball to be thrown a little more confidence in it. So I think he's another dark horse for them to rehab in the minors and get up. Sometimes these guys work out well. See Tyler Matzik. Sometimes these guys don't. We never saw Ken Giles last year, despite him looking pretty decent in the minors at times. So which of these guys would be the long man was another question he had in there. I really don't know. Part of me still thinks that Grant Holmes, your ideal scenario is AJ Smith-Shawver or somebody takes the fourth or fifth spot with Ian Anderson in the other, and Grant Holmes is your sixth starter / long man, right? If you're going to need a sixth starter in the upcoming road trip, you'll hold Holmes out to be that guy. If you don't, he can go into a game and pitch 3 or 4 innings if somebody gets blown up and you need it, right? I don't know which of these guys has the experience of pitching multiple innings and would be that long man. Probably somebody like a De Los Santos or Peretti, simply because Dylan Lee's not going to be that guy, right? You're not going to ask Perdomo to do it coming off of Tommy John. Pilar may be an option. Again, I haven't dug too much into what he's done in his past to see if he's done multi-inning outings. But I don't know if any of these guys would be that guy. And ideally, you're not going to need that too much of that guy. But either way, Fantastic questions this week. Thank you for everybody. We'll be back tomorrow. If you're listening on audio, do us a favor, leave us a 5-star review. If you're on YouTube, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you know when we drop the next episode. Also, maybe leave us a 5-star review. Those are always nice. Until next time, this has been Braves Today.